I would not be shocked if they continue to do more of these movies, chat, because, hey, it's like, hey, they kind of prove, like, you can have Denzel Washington just kind of sit down in a majority of his scenes and still be really cool. So it's like, all right, you proved it to me. You can definitely do it. So you could do a fourth one where he's just sitting down for the majority of the film. And you can have Dakota Fanning. She's still young. She's in her mid-30s at this point? Or maybe she might even be younger than I am. You know, she's in her 30s, you know, so go ahead. Go ahead. Have her run around while Denzel sits down. That's the sequel there for you, chat. Dakota runs around and Denzel sits down. Equalizer 4. Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class in the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. Enjoy the video. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next part of my show, and that is my review for the Equalizer 3, chat. The next film in the Equalizer series, rebooted by Antoine Fuqua and Denzel Washington. And for those that don't know the plot and the synopsis, Robert McCall, Denzel Washington, finds himself finally at home in southern Italy. But he discovers his new friends are under the control of the mafia. And as events turn deadly, McCall knows what he has to do: kill everybody who threatens his friends and family. You know, before jumping into the review itself, I kind of want to talk about briefly my experience with the Equalizer series and the films. You know, of course, you had the original series from the mid and late 80s starring Edward Woodward, who would pretty much travel across New York City, righting wrongs and injustices, using whatever he had at his disposal when it came to weapons and gadgets. You know, people would make use of a classified newspaper ad that read, "Got a problem? Odds against you? Call the Equalizer," and have like the number pop up and everything. He was pretty much a murderous Batman that was just consumed by guilt and, you know, trying to atone for his past actions. I learned today, Chad, I had no idea that this was a thing, but I just learned about this today. They have a TV reboot that's still going on right now with Queen Latifah as Robin McCall, basically a gender-bent version of Robert McCall, and where she's like a single mom murdering people in between bake sales and PTA meetings. I did not know this show existed. Again, we were just talking about how there's just such a glut of TV, chat, both good and bad, and it's impossible to consume all of it. And I guess it's also impossible to know, like, what is actually out there right now. So yeah, chat, I think it's like 3 seasons deep at this point. I think a 4th season's probably been greenlit, so you can go ahead and watch Queen Latifah just murdering people. So, you know, the Equalizer series, you know, the property, it has continued to be in the pop culture zeitgeist for nearly 40 years at this point. But, you know, people of my generation, you know, mostly millennials and certainly Gen Z, are probably more familiar with the Antoine Fuqua and Denzel Washington movies. You know, it's very obvious that these two just love working together. You know, they've worked together for decades. I mean, all the way back, I think, with 20 years ago with Training Day. And, you know, despite that relationship being like a cool aspect, you know, to their collaborations, I can't say I'm a big fan of the previous Equalizer films. They're just these really straightforward, generic action movies. Like, nothing about the supporting characters, the villains, or even some of the action itself, at least to me, is very interesting. The one thing about them that does work across the board, and I feel like a lot of people probably feel the same way, is that Denzel Washington is great. You know, he manages to elevate the material to his level when it's focused on him in the moment. And that's when I think the movies are interesting to watch. And I think, again, it's the same case for this film, this third and final chapter of the Equalizer series. I mean, they say it's the third and final chapter, but is it really though? It's the third and final chapter for now. It's great to put on a marquee. It's great to put on a poster. It's great to put in the marketing. But until it makes a lot of money and a lot of people, are clamoring for another one, they'll inevitably make the fourth and final film, right? I mean, wasn't John Wick Chapter 4 like that movie was supposed to be the end of the John Wick series, and they were going to be like, all right, now it's going to be all spin-offs and things, and now they're talking about like, oh yeah, we're doing a John Wick Chapter 5, no doubt about it. So it's like, okay, it's the third and final one for now. We'll see about that. Because already talking about wanting to do a prequel telling Israel. Oh, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. I can see them doing that. I could certainly see them doing that. Yeah, who would you cast as a young Den? Oh, they're going to go with his son. Shit. Oh, his son. Listen, I've definitely criticized John David Washington a lot, but he does not have his daddy's charisma. He really just doesn't, chat. Like, it'd be very hard for me to picture him because the Denzel just has this kind of, I don't know, like, he has that kind of like dead-eyed expression where just looking at you, you don't know what's actually like playing behind his eyes, like everything that he's thinking about, but it's just that kind of look that's like scary, like how he stares at you. And everything I see of John David Washington, he doesn't have that. At least they haven't had him in a role where he does something like that, in my opinion. So, but that's who they would absolutely fucking cast. They just have his son do it. And I don't think he's not as talented as his father is, in my opinion. And, for this movie, it's very funny. The mantra of Denzel Washington's character of Robert McCall is pretty much the more you fuck around and the more you're gonna find out, which I think is like very funny. It's almost like a consistent thing across all these films. He constantly, in this movie and the previous ones, he constantly tries to de-escalate all the conflicts before they begin. But inevitably, all of the bad guys like underestimate him, and they find out very quickly that this old man will mess them up to a point where they will be in horrific pain and most likely dead soon after. He constantly says, just walk away. Just walk away. Like he's the Lord Humongous, chat, of the action films. Until, again, it gets to a point where they can't walk away, where it's actually they're physically incapable of walking away because he has broken their legs, he's paralyzed them, or, what inevitably does happen is he kills them. And I have to admit, even watching like this movie and watching some clips of the previous two films, because it's been a while since I've seen those movies, and I have forgotten a lot about them. It's the tension and the lead up to the inevitable pain that these criminals go through, that is so good to watch and is very entertaining. Like, I have to admit, like, the how they build up the tension through the dialogue, or, again, you have Denzel Washington, like, literally sitting down through a lot of this movie, because he's an older man now at this point, chat. He's kind of like a retired operative, if you will. But, like, the way in which he'll, like, start pushing on someone's pressure point, and how the sound design like adds to that, hearing the cracking of the bone, the cartilage in the meat. You hear the tearing of the meat, chat, right, in a human body. Like, that is like, ooh, it's visceral. You feel it. And, this movie and in the previous two Equalizer films by Antoine Fuqua, they do that. They do that really well. A lot of the supporting characters in this film, and most definitely in the previous ones, don't exactly stand out. Not that the actors are doing a bad job, like especially for this particular movie, but in terms of, the family and the community that welcomes him into this town after he's injured during a job in the beginning of the film, and they're kind of like looking after him. They pretty much just serve as a plot device. They're just like, hey, we did this thing for you. Let's acclimate you to our small, quaint village. And we spent like a lot of time just, there. And, he basically views them at that point as his friends, and later pretty much as his family. And, again, that gets you invested. That gets you invested in the story at that point. He then views it later on. It's like, this thing needs to be protected at all costs, no matter what. And, it's at that point in the movie where I think it's a little slow. But at the same time, I can understand that they want to provide a reason as to why Washington's McCall feels so passionate about this community after spending, so much time in it. It's like, I see what's going on, but, with that bit of a slower pace, it might not be for everybody. Of course, the one character everyone is interested in this movie is obviously Dakota Fanning. Dakota Fanning is in the movie as a friend and an old CIA contact of Washington's McCall. But she's pretty much there as a bit of fan service for Man on Fire, which is a very important movie in the filmography of both Fanning and Washington. It's an excellent action film. I think one of the best of Tony Scott's career, the late great Tony Scott. And it's also fun that, so much of this movie is clearly inspired by the original novel of Man on Fire, which is actually set in Italy. And I was also told about this, recently by you guys, I think Deadpool in particular. Their interactions are very much a, wink and a nod to that material. So much so that sometimes I feel like this is kind of like an actual sequel to Man on Fire based on their conversations and what they're referencing. It's just like, are you kind of referencing like the events of Man on Fire, even though these two films like don't take place in the same universe at all? But, they're being very cheeky with that, which is, again, it's cool seeing them reunite. They do have chemistry, even though they're both of them are much older than what they originally were in Man on Fire. But one of the great aspects of that original movie was just like you could totally buy into that relationship. That he starts out as this alcoholic bodyguard taking care of this girl. It's just a job, but he does pretty much become a father figure towards her. I mean, she even refers to him like as her like teddy bear or something at one point in the movie, and like that's endearing. And you're really you feel invested here. And, they definitely do that between the two of them. Like, you get a sense that they've known each other for, quite some time, and they have a history. And it's like, but is it the history that's set up in the world of this movie, or is it the history that's set up in Man on Fire? It's probably a combination of both. But it is cool seeing them reunite because they actually do have chemistry with each other, like, even all these years later. I mean, God, the movie came out in 2004, 2005. So nearly 20, it's been almost 20 years, chat, right? So, if anything, like, seeing them together again, it makes me want to see like either another film in this series where it is them together, where they do a job together, or they do another movie together, because it's just an interesting duo that's like, wow, I actually didn't know I missed this. It would actually be fun to see them interact more, because again, I go back to this. And I think it's the same for all the other films in this particular rebooted Equalizer series, is that aside from Denzel Washington, and also in this case Dakota Fanning, even though I don't think they give her enough to do, this film just doesn't really have any characters that are interesting or fun to be around. Like, so many of them are just kind of like props to Denzel Washington. That's really what it is. Again, they're not necessarily bad. I mean, some of the villains I don't think are all that great. Certainly, like the villain at the end of this movie, first of all, like so much of the time in this film, we are just fighting like random, mafia thugs, that are just, again, they're fucking around and they're finding out not to mess with, Denzel Washington. And that's pretty much what we deal with in the movie. Like, there is like a head bad guy, but he comes in like really late after a while, and then you don't really like care. It's just like, oh, it's supposed to be like, oh, this big third act and everything, and he's gonna confront the bad guy. But it's like, I'm not really invested in you. I don't. So much of what I am invested in is just like Denzel and him just messing people up at that point, because it's entertaining to watch. There's no doubt about that. But in terms of like the bad guy's just doing bad guy things. He's like, listen, man, I was born in this. It's generational. I mean, what do you want from me? I'm the bad guy. And that's all they really have going for him. And so the rest of the characters, they don't really do anything with them, aside from the occasional times in which Denzel and Dakota Fanning are speaking to each other, which is nice. The rest of the movie, I think, just goes through the motions. You have a very strong start in the beginning. It's actually a really excellent open. An hour or so to get to know everybody, get to know the other props in the movie. And then you have the fucking around and finding out in the last third, which is entertaining. It does everything you expect it to do. Is it better than the other films? Maybe. I think it's definitely better than 2, because I was rewatching some clips today, because I saw the movie. I forgot I watched it. I was like, did I see this movie? And I was misremembering certain things, because I thought like, oh, that was in 1, but it was actually the sequel. I was like, oh, okay. I think, based on what I remember of 2, this is definitely better than 2. Like, I think no question. And maybe it's even better than the first one as well. But I come back to this and I say, it's not an action film that I'm personally going to rewatch again. I mean, I will say this. If you're not in the mood right now for more fantastical genre fare, something that is like a Barbie or superhero movie or like a horror film, you just want to see kind of a scaled down action movie with, not too many stakes or similar stakes that you've kind of seen time and time again, but with like a really strong, leading performance of Denzel Washington. And he is very good in this movie. Believe me, you're going to be charmed by him. You're going to like him. You're going to feel invested when he is on the screen. Then I think you actually probably will like this. It's Denzel Washington, despite his age, and they comment on that. And, and he's not slim anymore. He's a little thicker around the middle, Chad. He's sitting down a lot. I have to admit, there's a plot point in this movie where, okay, we're going to explain the reason why he's constantly sitting down all the time. And it's like, all right, I'll give it to you. But it's like, come on now. But he is, despite sitting down and putting his feet up throughout the movie, he is a badass. And I feel like you might dig the movie quite a bit just for him being the badass former CIA operative, that he was back in his head, heyday. And I liked it for that. I think I liked this movie more than I originally thought I would. I thought it was like, it's going to be another generic, forgettable action film. And there are aspects about it that are indeed that. And I feel like, if this script, that's the thing. Is that I think my issues with this movie, it's not anything with like what was shot or a lot of the acting. It's just that I kind of wish that this film, that the screenplay got a bit of a punch up. That they did more with the family that Denzel Washington is being helped by and that he's, with through a lot of the movie. If we got more with the relationship between Denzel and Dakota Fanning. Like, had they done that more, I think I would have liked this film even more. I would have been like, oh, wow. It was a huge uptick in quality compared to the first films. And it is a bit of an uptick in quality compared to the first two movies, from what I remember. But not as much as I would have liked. But yeah, I think it's a solid, action drama film with a nice heaping helping of fan service for those that are huge fans of Man on Fire and that movie's history, and particularly with the relationship between Denzel Washington and Dakota Fanning. But for myself, I thought it was good. I thought it was solid, chap. But yeah, that's just my general thoughts on Equalizer 3. I would not be shocked if they continue to do more of these movies, chat, because, hey, it's like, hey, they kind of prove like you can have Denzel Washington just kind of sit down in a majority of his scenes and still be really cool. So it's like, all right, you proved it to me. You can definitely do it. So you could do a fourth one where he's just sitting down for the majority of the film. And you can have Dakota Fanning. She's still young. She's in her mid-30s at this point? Or maybe she might even be younger than I am. She's in her 30s, so go ahead. Go ahead. Have her run around while Denzel sits down. That's the sequel there for you, chat. Dakota runs around and Denzel sits down. Equalizer 4 next year. That's what they need to do. But that's just my general thoughts on Equalizer 3. What about you guys? Did you like the film? Are you interested in seeing the movie? Let me know.
I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.